And so I got my biggest brush out, my 2-inch brush, and while the surface is wet, like I mentioned, it's gonna help me really cover my background. And the color that I'm gonna start with is the blues and whites and work our ways down to using white and brown just to tone the surface. So you never wanna start off with a white canvas if it doesn't really support your painting. So what I'm gonna do is go ahead and cut in where I want my horizon line. It's gonna fall kind of around the middle zone, but we shall see how that ends up. So first color I'm going to mix though is a lighter blue. And this was using my cobalt and a little bit of white. And so you want a nice sky soft blue. We don't need it to be super deep. It's a nice winter day. And then another color I'm going to mix over here is a pinch of my browner yellow and some white. I like to be able to grab colors, when I'm painting just when I need them. So I'm just grabbing that and pinching this color and just adding a little bit. So we're going to be using a lot of beige tones in this piece, a lot of warm yellows. And I was just painting another room in my mom's house, and I've been loving the names that Home Depot puts on all their paint swatches. They got eggnog written on stuff. They got latte here and there, butternut squash. Such fun names for colors. But it really is honestly stuff that reminds you of cream and things like that. So I'm just going to be using some cream tones for the bottom area, and then I'm going to base coat the top. So we're going to just mix that colors together. And so I just have, again, warm yellow and white over here and blue and white over here. And I'm going to use this warmer tone to go ahead and cut in a hill in the background. And it doesn't need to be right in the middle. I'm usually right below middle for my horizon lines. And I'm just going to start off with a nice slope and cut in one more right here. And just break up the surface here at the bottom. So I'm just going straight through my canvas. And I got 3 lines I've made, all of them curvy. And then you can sweep your brush right in between some of these areas. And any of these gaps that I have left over is where I'm going to insert a little bit of white. So again, I'm using the yellowish. I'm going to use the yellowish white tone to do that. And then you can just use regular white. So I'm going to wash off my brush for you. And that way those two colors are going to touch, but not completely erase the other one. So I'm going to just use regular white to fill in the rest of my canvas in between. So this will help complete the ground. And I'm just going to pause us right there for a moment. And then I'm going to explain how we can do our sky. And I'm just using my biggest brush, and see that you can still see my yellowish white areas, but I want to soften the area in between them. So these are going to be like nice shadows from the sun reflecting onto our snow. So we definitely want some white snow as well. But I'm going to use a little bit of that warm color to put some shadows down too. And you just want to make sure you're doing long brush strokes to go from left to right, and just allow your arm to kind of swing back and forth. And it's okay if the paint blends a little bit. You can always go back in and re-add in some shadows if you want. Kind of a nice honey tone. And see that I can now revisit if I need to, push some more shadows in, but you just really want to make sure your surface looks nice and broken up, whites, and a little bit of that warm beige tone. And after you get your ground covered, that was white plus your beige, your sky is that second color that you mixed. And what I'm going to do is pause after I explain the sky because I want everyone to be able to do their edges. So any color that I usually have on the front, I wrap that over those inches on the side. So what I'm going to do for my background is get it started for you up here in the corner. But don't forget that if you have like an inch, inch and a half, you can go ahead and wrap those colors as well to finish off your canvas. But right up here in the sky, what I'm going to do is transition down into my ground space with white and light blue. And so what you can do is take your light blue that you mixed and start off here at the top of your canvas. And as you come down towards your ground space, you can start gradually adding in more and more white so it starts to fade. So you want just a very nice soft gradient, and the water from your canvas should help you blend it, but definitely feel free if you have your heater on or a fan running, that if your paint's drying pretty quick, to just keep your brush damp as you're blending so you can buff out any harsh brush lines. And I'm just gradually adding white until I hit that horizon line that I made here, almost in the middle. And I'm just really going back and forth a few times to buff out any harsh brush lines because I really don't want that in my sky. I'm going to save that for when we go towards the tree. So you should see a nice hint of blue. And so that will be where I think a good start to toning our background. So you can continue to do that, and don't forget your edges. And I'm going to just halt my jazz music for just a moment. Because like I mentioned, there's a few things when you're doing tonal areas, it doesn't need to be perfectly dry because you do want things to be softened. So that way they seem far away and get a little bit of some atmospheric perspective that way. So a lot of times, especially here in Virginia, your mountains are very blue, soft against the horizon line. There's no really harsh, sharp lines that you're going to find from a distance. So I do want to start building up our forest, making sure the trees are very pushed back for us because we're going to have a few in the forward area as well. And like I mentioned, I washed off my big 2.5-inch brush and I grabbed some medium-sized brushes, and I would just have both your flats and rounds nearby. Um, there's two different kinds of trees that we're really going to have. So there's a nice variety. So you definitely can jump around with your brushes and load them up. But the colors I'm going to use is actually those cooler browns now. So on your plate, if you don't have a cool browns just means they added black or blue to it to tone it down a little bit. It's just heavier on that side than the reds and the yellows in it. And with a flat brush, I'm just going to grab a little bit of my cooler brown and I'm going to add some white to it. So I'm going to color that color down a little bit, and I'm going to get some black in it to really stone it up a bit. So black, white, and some brown so we can get a nice stone color to use. So not quite taupe, but pretty close to it. And of course, I have my favorite color palettes. I love taupe. I love using beiges, gold tones, and turquoise. I feel like I find excuses just to have those colors in a painting. And so this is a nice color. And the other second color that I use for faraway trees is you can actually take more of that browner yellow that you have and tone that down as well. And I didn't even clean off my brush. Notice I'm using a dirty brush. I just grabbed a little bit of that yellow and I'm making a second pile of a cool tone to use, and a little bit of that warm yellow and some white. And I used a dirty brush so a little bit of my black can get into that color to cool it down as well. So that would just let yourself have at least two tree colors. So again, you can just make a second one by making a second pile of this taupe and add a little bit of yellow to it so it differs a little bit. And no, I didn't wash my brush off. I purposely did that so that way a little bit of black got into that color as well. Just wanted to cool it down a little bit. And once you have those colors, what I'm going to really be using is my flats because I really just want to sweep in a few barren trees. And some trees aren't barren during the winter. That's why I love this piece is because you can have variety in it and you don't have to just have one kind of tree here in the background. So a couple of trees that you're going to notice, I'm going to use a diluted color, which just means I'm adding more water. So you're kind of like using watercolors in order to get these ones to really go flat. So the water is going to help that paint spread out so it's not a very harsh line. So just a little bit of water so that way it's not like a medium body or a creamy color. Just want to thin that color down a little bit by adding water to it. And then you can take some moisture off on your paper towel and things. So you don't want it dripping. You just want it thinner than its usual consistency. And with my little flat brush, what I'm going to do first, and this is why I'm diluting the color down, so you can definitely see me do this step first, is with this loose color, and see how transparent that is. So that's how transparent it is. I'm going to fade in some color here. And what this tint's going to do is to help build up the fact that there's bushes, maybe grass and things like that. And I'm just rounding out my brush. So I'm just twirling it like you're making clouds on the ground, or imagine like fog. And I'm just using my taupe color, diluting it with a little bit of water. And I'm just going around my horizon line because right now there's sky there. So I'm going to start off with some faded tall trees, and I'm just loading up a flat brush with my taupe again, but I don't need to dilute it this time as much. I don't need it to be super transparent. And so what I'm going to do is have a few tall trees break up the surface. I'm going all the way up to the top part of my sky. So there's one. And again, you don't have to dilute your paint for this one. You just want to make sure you used white, so it's a taupe tone. Trees in the front, we can go charcoals and some hard on like grays and things like that. So we can do a little bit deeper tones at that point. And while you have this taupe, what we can do is go ahead and plan where you want your bigger trees to go. So this will not be their final color. We're just planning some spacing for our trees. So what you have is 1, 2, 3, these little land separations, and in each one I put a tree. So you can see exactly where they're going to go in case it's very light. But what I do is take my taupe, and I know my baby bear is going to be here on the left-hand side, and then I'm going to have the biggest bear here in the middle. So what I always like to do is make sure that you can actually just tap a little bit of a line where you want the bears to go before you put your trees in, if it helps with that. So like, for example, if I want my baby bear to go here, I can make a little 2-inch line here. And then if I know I want mama bear to go over here, I would just mark a shadow on the ground here. So you can actually use your shadows to plan ahead. So I know I'm gonna have a bear here, and then I'm gonna have a baby bear here. So now I know not to put a tree there. That's all those little lines will mean to me. And then later on, we can buff them into being a shadow on the ground. So they can play two purposes for us. So I just did a small line for baby bear, and then I did, and here you go with my finger, because y'all know I don't use rulers. So my thumb's right here next to mama bear. That's how big she is. And then baby bear is very small. But once I know where the baby bear is, I want the baby to come out behind a tree. So what I can do is lay my flat brush down, and I can just pull a tree right here all the way up to the top of my canvas. And it's all right if it hits the overlapped a tree in the background, and that's fine. And then I can reload my brush up again, and I can put some more big trees in. So again, those trees are going to have two color tones. So this taupe will help set up their body of the trees a little bit. So I know I have a bear here. So I'm going to put a tree right in between them, and I'm going to come down. So remember, you got more than one shadow that you put down here. So you can pick another area or layer for your tree. So you can have one here, and they can put one right here in the middle ground. So not all the way down to the bottom of your canvas. So I'm going to pull out another tree a little bit bigger here in the middle. I'm going to go all the way to the top of my canvas. And just getting my brush wet again and getting more paint when I do. And then I'm just going to drag. So it's okay if the first pass through, if it gets a little transparent on, you can always run right back through it again. So there's another tree for you. Nice and rectangular and all the way up to the top of my canvas. And I got a subtle tapering effect going on, so it's getting a little bit bigger. And I'm just going to put some more big trees and I'm just going to go ahead and just keep going around. So I'm going to put one more here in front of my other bear. And then we can go back to our horizon line to play around with those trees. So we're allowing that paint to set up a little bit back there before we go over top of it again. And for some of the trees in the background, like I said, I want them to be pretty and wintry. So like right here, I have a clearing. So it's okay wherever the bears are going to be, they're going to be pure black. They can go over top of anything we're about to do. So one tree that I like doing is just like a triangular pattern. So what I sometimes do is get the height of a tree planned out first by just actually doing a triangle. Because what I can do is on top of that is I can put, here's a middle to the tree. And then with a little flat brush, you can go along this triangle and build up some body to it. So we are going to put snow on this, so it's okay to fill it in completely. You don't have to worry about like leaving space for anything. But what I do is I go like the letter V, and you can go up and down outside of the triangle. Make sure it's on the outside so you're hiding those construction lines. You don't need those showing. And what I'm doing is just taking my brush and notice it's flat and you can even flick it. So it's okay to let the hairs of your brush create some textures for you to make it more realistic. So if you see that, just little straight lines can help build up the body. Another simple tree that I can do, and I'm going to do more than one of those ones, is another one that you can do is use the same color, but you can just do a barren tree with no leaves. So like over here, I can draw a nice curved line with the same color, and I can use a small flat. And you can just imagine the letter Y and just kind of add on some smaller branches to it, but they don't need any leaves. There won't be any extra textures. Then if any of your trees are taller and you do see any leaves on them, if you take a little brush, you can totally dab some foliage onto some of your trees. Like I mentioned, not all trees lose their leaves around here in Virginia. So what you can do is actually take just the corner of your brush, or you can get your rounded brush and you can just dab for leaves. But what I would do is make sure you dilute the paint so that way those leaves spread out so they seem far away. You don't want them to be building up very heavily. So I am watering down my color over here, and then I can just dab some leaves onto these trees over here. So not all of the trees have lost their leaves. So there's some snow encrusted ones going to be back here. Did you definitely want to dilute the color? We don't want these popping forward. You can even do this dabbing technique towards the ground, and then that will make it look like there's some bushes around the bases of some of your trees. So dabbing can go a mile in this painting. If you go up high, it's going to look like leaves. If you go down low, it's going to look like bushes in the distance. And the main trick is to make sure that you're not using your paint at an icing level. You want to use it very thin. Let that water help you spread the paint out. It's going to have a more faded, foggy appearance if you dilute the color. So here I am at the ground. See, I'm just dabbing to fill in some gaps. So you don't have to keep adding trees to fill in any negative space. Maybe we can put some bushes in. We're going to do some grass too in some places. So we got a few other things we can add. So I'm just going to dab my brush to put leaves and some other vegetation back here in the background. You can even go directly onto the ground and just dab a bush and just work in a circular motion in order to create that shape. So we can let our imagination run. When people look at paintings, we always reinterpret something differently from someone else. So definitely can just leave those and let somebody be like, oh, is that bushes? Is it leaves? Is there something piled up on the ground? And I feel like I love that in any painting if I've got a little bit of some guessing to do. Forest line's pretty full, so I'm just enjoying my coffee over here. But just giving people a heads up that when you're done with that step, I'm just going to talk about the trees here in the foreground next. So don't let your little brushes go away. I'm going to still utilize your flat brushes for that step, and I would just, wash them off though. And we're just going to play with our colors in order to bring these trees forward a little bit. And hopefully we'll sketch in our bears, because if you haven't been touching your snow recently, it should be really dry. So I can show how you can use color pencil or your Sharpie in order to sketch in your bears. So I just have scrap paper. Feel free to also, like, I always tell people, like, I toss a plate or something, I test something out on it, and then I do it on my canvas. So, artists are not just flinging out things. And I'm just drawing some lines right now for a tree for the baby bear. And usually when I'm doing the baby bear, and I'm going to allow you to see my construction line so you see what this looks like unfilled, but it's kind of like a slanted rectangle for the body. And I just do just like that. So this was the tree. This is the baby bear coming out from behind it. And usually what I do is just make sure I do some boxy legs, kind of like a rectangle. And then you just want to have another one coming forward. And notice it's kind of like chopsticks. You just want to have some chopsticks to show direction. So we're definitely still doing stick figures. I always told a couple of my students years later, like, how do you get so good at drawing people? And I said stick figures. And the same thing with animals. I realized years ago that you can draw stick figures for anything and then make the lines bigger later on. So I'm just going to use rectangles mainly for the bottom half of his body. And then I just do triangles wide open, kind of like a volcano shape, really, for the neck. And again, I'm not going to fill this in so you guys can see all my shapes without lines. So here's a triangle, here's a square, there's another leg. So this would be where your snow would be. So you can cut the snow back over the legs as much as you want. So you can even make the body bigger and fill in this portion to make the legs shorter. So you can play with the shape of the bear before you fill it in. And then if you have a triangle for the neck, you want to make sure that you land your circle right on top of it. So the point of the triangle is going to disappear. And then I just do a circle for the size of the head, some U shapes for the ears. And again, see this? You can, if you're like, oh, that's not big enough, well, then draw it again. We haven't filled it in yet. So you can always get bigger in painting. You just can't get smaller. So that's why I always say start off small, make something larger if you need to. And then I come underneath. So whenever you're doing, here's the ears, you can draw a straight line down from your ears. So right in the middle of them is where a jawline would start. That's actually kind of true for people too. So I just draw a straight line in between those ears. And then I can come underneath his chin, the swoop out for his nose and his mouth. So I just go from the top, and then I come, and you can actually mark another line through. So here, if you have a plus sign, so right at the top of your plus sign, you can actually hook out the nose. So there's my baby bear. So I just did boxes for the legs and arms, and I would just slant them slightly. I did a triangle and then a circle on top of the triangle for the head. And then I just did the letter U for the ears. And the trick to line up someone's mouth or an animal's mouth and eyes is usually the nose and the ears give it away due to bone structure. So if you have ears, you can draw a plus sign inside of your circle. And at the bottom of the middle line, that's where you want to start the jaw. And then you can come from the middle line in order to finish for the nose. So that plus sign will actually make sure that your nose and your mouth are not too big. So if you make that plus sign first, you can. And then the great thing is all you have to do is fill that in after you play with that. So you can definitely use a pencil first if you wanted to, and also sharpied in your bear first in order to make the shape. And a mama bear is just, oh, should I put this? She's like 2 circles worth. So what I do usually is the back part's a little bit bigger, just like of a polar bear. and you could do an egg shape for the front part. So for the mama bear, it's 2 parts, so kind of imagine like a panda or polar bears, and they're a little bit bigger in the back with the back part. So I just do a circle and then an oval, and then that way too, you have space for the front legs and the back legs. And then if you have an oval, you can come off the oval for the head as a circle. So that way it's kind of like a snowman, only as if the snowman was breaking up in a few gaps in between. So you make a snowman on its side. And the head is definitely, a little high up here, but you can move heads around. So it's fine if it's up top, but she's walking, so I'm putting her head a little high. And then you can just connect them. So I just go straight from this line to this one for the neck this time, so you don't do a triangle since it's not a young bear. And if you want to make the head bigger or change things, just like with the baby bear, I can edit. And then I can go from this line over for the back. So see I'm floating above. And then I can make the belly rounded, and I can do a parenthesis mark for that. So I got a head, oval, circle, and I'm just doing curved lines in between to connect them. And the shapes just really help me get the sizing done. For her face though, I make it pointier because of the age. So that's the difference really, is you can make it a little bit sharper to show a little bit of difference. But it's kind of boxy, almost kind of like a dog's nose. So you can still come from the bottom. You can do that plus system again if you need to. But I'm just gonna eyeball it for this one. I'll just make it nice and boxy. And the ears are still a U shape, so that's consistent with the baby bear. I just make it flatter, so baby bear is a little bit rounder. But you can definitely get sharper with your line work with the mama. And I'm just gonna do legs on her next. There's no tail really. The tail's very flat and they're extremely fluffy this time of year too, so a lot of details like they get lost even on a dog. And then I'm going to use stick figures again for you. So I would just go ahead, instead of doing all the details of a leg, I always just kind of do, here's a leg, and I'm just doing chopsticks. So that way you got the front part of the leg and the back. So there's one, there's another. So just make sure she's walking first before we fill it in. So there's another leg here coming off of that oval. Because this is, just shoulder blades and then our hind legs here in the back. So I'm just going right off these shapes. So 2 on here and 2 over here. And then I can come forward for my last leg. And then what I do is, just to make her paw come up, I'm just going to actually draw that like an open book shape before I fill it in. And then I can just curve underneath. So there's one paw up. And I can just put the rest of them going right into the snow. So remember, you're going to have snow. So their paws are actually going down deep. And I would definitely invite anyone, you can totally try these lines out. I'm not filling these ones in, so you can see these for a minute. And you can actually just make the legs bigger now after I draw them in. But I always say, when you're learning something new, allow yourself to make mistakes. And then you made a mistake, then you learned how to do it, and then you have more confidence when you do it the second time around. And remember, your baby bear, the amount of space you have just determines how big his head's going to be in little details. And I think that's how big my baby bear is going to end up being. And I'm going to take some Sharpies to fill this in now. So here I go. And you always want to do head first, so that way it's okay if her tail ends up behind a tree or something. You just want to make sure you have plenty of room for a head first. So the baby bear's head's here, so mama bear's head needs to be about here. And this is what I was talking about, where she might cover the bottoms of some of my trees, depending on where she ends up. And if you have your bears done, what you can do is with a slightly dry brush, you can go ahead and dab some snow onto any of the trees that you want to. Now, my barren trees, I'm leaving them barren and they're not holding no snow. But a dry brush and snow is how I really get some nice packed on snow. So I definitely want it to seem clumpy. I don't want it to be a transparent amount of snow. But if you take a flat brush, you can actually go ahead, depending on how many trees you have, you just want to make sure you're still doing a V pattern because the snow won't be on every level of the tree. It's going to be broken up just like the branches. And what you can do is on all the trees that can hold some snow, you just go in your background and tap the snow onto the levels. And you just want to make sure you're skipping around. So hopefully like on this tree, you're going to see my snow is like a V pattern and it's ending up on my longest branches, but you can still see the middle of the tree where those shorter branches are not holding a pile of snow. So I'm just tapping some more on this one before I move to another branch. So this one now has snow on it and I'm using a dry brush and you're just wanting to slightly tap to release and pack on the snow because we don't want the water to spread this color around. We definitely want it nice and packed on. The tree colors are completely optional and that's just these last few ones that I'm going to do here. So I'm just grabbing a little bit of my flat brush and I'm just going to pick a few of them to be birch and some of them regular. So feel free that if you're just playing around with snow, you can watch me do these trees and then pick some color tones to add on top of them. And this will be my final thing left to show, but they're really nice just to help break up the frame. So they do have a nice purpose that they do. So for birch trees, what I'm going to do is grab a little bit of white, and let me just turn this one in. And it's bark tones. So the taupe is something that's going to help give body to this tree. So I'm just going to streak the white down. So it's not like perfectly opaque or anything. I definitely am building up texture of everything I'm adding. So I'm going over top one of my taupe trees so you can still see some of my taupe because white birch trees, that white falls off in places. So I definitely want that realistic look to it. It wouldn't be perfectly hanging onto the tree in every part. So there comes in some white. And what you can do then is tap in some more dry texture on it. And I can grab some of this charcoal tone and put a few straight horizontal lines along my birch trees. And remember, charcoal just means it's a dark gray, so it can vary quite a bit. And so I'm just going to go and with a dry brush, I'm tapping in some straight-ish lines and dry because I want it to have some texture to it. So I'm just going to put these little break-in areas on my birch tree. I'm just tapping my brush to release these little marks because I want them to seem very broken up. I'm going all the way down to my ground. You could just scratch a few more textures here to make it broken up so you can now see taupe white And you can see my dark scar marks, and I'm going to grab white again, load it up. So you want a slightly damp brush for the white, and allow the taupe to be your shadow tone. So don't make your taupe disappear. You just want to have that shadow tone behind everything. So something wouldn't be perfectly white. It would have white or highlight tone on one side, and it would have a shadow on the other side. I'm going to turn this one into a birch tree too. So I'm just going to paint white on it. Allow the taupe to show so it has some shadows. I have here. And you can do just a pure gray tree as well. So you can use that tone in its pure form. Maybe I'll pinch a little bit of brown into it to make it different. So I'm just mixing around with this color. So I got 3 birches on here. The birches are really fun. Very simple. You can do all the trees birch if you would like. And I'm just going to do one dark tree here in the middle. And while you still have these brushes, feel free to add some vegetation to the ground, just like we did in the background. So you can definitely have grass or something else peeking up out of the snow. Or as one person did, like birds are also something that's really popular to add to a piece like this. So you can just do whatever inspires you to add to this piece. And I'm just going to do one dark tree for some contrast. And I'm just like the ones in the background, I'm going to go ahead and use the Y method to go ahead and just add on. And then grass, you can use the same brush, and I can just go down here and have some little Ys on the ground to look like the top part of a bush trying to peek out or a smaller plant. You can use just that lighter brown tone in order to do these, or the same charcoal tone. And notice I'm barely really talking about washing my brush. I'm just using a lot of the same color tones right now. But that's something else you can do to help make look a little bit more realistic. There's little trees. Not all the trees are going to be giant. I know not in the back there was like only really one kind of tree you could put snow onto, but these ones are a little bit bigger here and closer in the picture frame to us. So what I could do is for this big tree is I can just tap in some dry snow in the corners where the snow might get caught. Now I just need to clean off my brush real quick in order to do that part. So I can just tap some snow like right here in the corner of this little Y pattern. So snow can get caught in some funny places. I'll frost this one as well. And the tapping is definitely very useful when the paint's still slightly damp. Because I can just always smear off any colors I catch and then go right back to it. Like I just mentioned, I just signed here at the bottom. And I always really make sure to get that date on there. I'm one of those people that's like, I'm not going to remember the exact date I did something.